My name is Bobby. There's a new foe at the great house of Collinwood, one who brings a reign of terror, and proves the hand is quicker than the eye, even with those glasses.
Petofi,
the hand is mine. It's mine again.
Hi, I'm Bobby, and we are back to the Dark Shadows with the second and final part of my review for the 1897 storyline. My last video, 1897 Part 1, dealt primarily with the first half of the story, before Count Petofi arrives. And this video deals primarily with the second half, after that crazy count makes the scene. And it's episodes 792 to 884, and for the DVDs, volume 15 through volume 17. I thoroughly enjoyed the first half of the story for its action, humor, and otherworldly atmosphere. But will the second half disappoint me, or will I be giving the Dark Shadows gang a really big hand?
After arranging the death of his wife, Reverend Gregory Trask marries Judith Collins, drives her insane, places her in a sanitarium, and then becomes the acting master of Collinwood. Magda the Gypsy has recently stolen the magical hand of Count Petofi to help cure Quentin of the werewolf curse. However, under the guise of Victor Fenn-Gibbons, Count Petofi himself arrives at Collinwood and creates a reign of terror and mischief. To stop him, Barnabas brings Petofi his hand. But when it's revealed that Barnabas comes from groovy 1969, Petofi sets his sights on going to the future to escape the gypsies that he fears. Petofi orders the artist Charles Delaware Tate to paint Quentin's portrait. And because of Tate's unique power, Quentin no longer becomes the werewolf. But the Quentin in the painting does. Barnabas is still a hunted vampire, both by Edward Collins and Petofi. However, Julia goes back in time to save Barnabas from the dreaded stake through the heart, and the two continue their mission to save the possessed David Collins. Judith returns from the sanitarium to get revenge on Trask, and Barnabas and Quentin have their final showdown with Count Petofi.
The first half of the story goes off in its own direction, exploring the world of the new 1897 characters. But in the second half, the story becomes more focused, but it also gets crazier than ever before. First of all, Barnabas gets back to his original goal and reason for being in the past. Saving David Collins. And we actually check in to 1969 for an episode, and we see the possessed David Collins die. This reinvigorates the urgency of having to save David in the past. And after 100 episodes in, we needed that. And we finally find some of the answers we've been looking for.
He sees David as the reincarnation of Jameson Collins. Jameson is the only one Quentin truly loved. But before Quentin died, Jameson rejected him. In death, his spirit could not rest.
I love the unpredictability of the storylines that take place in the past, because they can kill off anyone. But I find I care most about the Collins family of the present, like David, Carolyn, etc., and Barnabas cares most about them too. So having one of them in immediate danger really raises the stakes. Then when that settles down, Count Petofi, our primary villain, decides he wants to go to the future.
Ed Sullivan, here I come.
And who knows what he's going to do to the Collins family there, so it becomes even more suspenseful. It's a simple plot, Barnabas fighting Petofi to protect his family, but an exciting one.
To keep this basic plot from becoming dull, there are plenty of colorful and crazy events going along with it. The first half of the story, with its crazy characters like Carl Collins, established that anything could happen in this story. And in the second half, it does. Count Petofi, being all-powerful, possesses Jameson Collins, and a special shout-out to child actor David Hennessy. He totally captures the older and sinister spirit of Petofi. The pompous Edward Collins is suffering a delusion where he thinks he's the world's greatest butler, and the prudish Charity Trask becomes possessed by the burlesque singer Pansy Faye. Even the often underused Joan Bennett gets in on it and performs a deliciously macabre revenge on her husband, Reverend Trask. Judith, let me out! You can't leave me here!
Yes, Gregory. Now you can have all the time you want to meditate.
You must let me out! This isn't like you!
You were just saying you wish you could spend the rest of your life here at Collinwood. Now that's possible. It's filled with surprises, and you get to see these actors do things you'd never think they would do. It's tons of fun, but because the main plot is so basic, it never gets too complicated for its own good. Also making this story fun are the characters. The character that distinguishes and dominates the second half of the story is the new and frightfully fabulous Dark Shadows villain, Count Ptolemy, played by Thayer David.
Thayer was inspired to go into the theater after listening to Orson Welles' Mercury Theater radio show. Dark Shadows fans knew him for his raspy voice and amazing versatility, playing more roles than anyone else on the show. And the cast and crew knew Thayer as a walking encyclopedia, and as the biggest eater they had ever seen. More than any other Dark Shadows actor, he would collaborate with the costume designer and makeup man to create the look of the character. Never was his creativity more apparent than with Count Ptolemy.
Count Ptolemy is a wizard with a magical hand. Now, years earlier, he suffered under the werewolf curse. Now, when a gypsy cures him of this curse, she cut off his hand and took it as payment. Without his hand, he still has some magic, but once he reclaims it, Count Ptolemy becomes all-powerful and can even take away Barnabas's vampire powers. I know why you refused to help Jameson and Quentin. The power in that hand is gone. Indeed, I take my hand away, and you will no longer be able to engage in your favorite trick. Now try to disappear. I will disappear to find out what has happened to Jameson. However, there's more to him than just that. He has a weakness. He's terrified of the gypsies. He's killed many in the past, and now they are always after him. That's why he wants to escape to the future. He also genuinely likes and relates to Quentin Collins. Thayer David is so charismatic in this role. He's genuinely evil, but he also has some funny lines, and he has a great sidekick to play off of, the murderous Aristide, played by Michael Stroka. Why do you think I employ Aristide? The dear boy is no intellectual giant. It is because I shun all violence. Aristide, on the other hand, kills without the slightest feeling for his victim. His Excellency is not bluffing.
Along with Ptolemy working his magic, so does Laura Parker as Angelique. She's brought into the story when Quentin and Evan Hanley summon a dark spirit. And when the black magic is rockin', Angelique comes a-knockin'. As usual, she's trying to kill Catherine Lee Scott, and she's as self-centered as ever. But her character does develop throughout the story.
She still has her evil moments, which we Dark Shadows fans love. But she does legitimately help Barnabas and Quentin. It's usually for a price, but she does help, even with trying to destroy Count Ptolemy. She also still loves and develops this protectiveness over Barnabas Collins, but as usual, he rejects her. As usual, concern for me is concern for yourself. After Barnabas is exposed and is consumed by his own problems, Angelique sets her sights on Quentin. Leaving a vampire for a werewolf. Twilight, where did you get that idea? And she forces Quentin to promise to marry her. I wouldn't get on that train if I were you. What are you gonna do, kill me? Quentin, I wouldn't hurt you, I promise. But Amanda Harris won't be quite as fortunate. You decide, Quentin. Does Amanda live or does she die? Later on, she admits this was part of her deal with the devil to make a man fall in love with her. But there's also a sense that she did this partially to make Barnabas jealous and as a half-hearted attempt to actually move on. At the end, she decides to let Quentin off the hook and let him go after the one he loves, Amanda Harris. So just like Barnabas, she becomes less of a villain and more of an emotionally complex anti-hero. Just as Angelique grows, so does Quentin.
Julia finds out that Quentin's ghost possesses David because Jameson rejects him, and Quentin dies without having time to reconcile. However, when this event plays out again, Quentin lives and does not become the evil ghost. He is also cured of being a werewolf by the painting of Charles Delaware Tate, where the Quentin in the painting becomes the werewolf and ages, while Quentin the person stays human and young forever.
Through these events and working with Barnabas to try to stop Petofi, Quentin becomes a less selfish and a better human being. At one point, Petofi demands that Quentin kill Barnabas. Now, the Quentin in the beginning of the story would have done this before we could say Brandy Snifter. But when Quentin goes to the coffin with the wooden stake, he doesn't know what to do.
No! You faced whatever you had to. I will too.
Quentin ultimately decides to stand by his friend. Julia Hoffman appears in the story as well, and her unrequited love for Barnabas always brings heart to the series. Along with the characters making the story great, so does its use of literary sources.
The Dark Shadows writers are notorious for borrowing ideas from books and movies to formulate their own storylines, and it certainly happens with 1897.
Quentin's insane wife Jenny Collins, the strict schoolmaster Reverend Trask, and the governess Rachel Drummond are inspired by the characters in Jane Eyre. The werewolf mythology and the connection to gypsies is taken from the Wolfman movie. The idea of a painting aging while the person stays young is from the picture of Dorian Gray, and the relationship between Count Petofi and Aristide is very similar to the relationship between the Fat Man and Joel Cairo in the noir classic The Maltese Falcon.
Sometimes they would just take one source, like with Frankenstein, and it comes across as a ripoff. But here they incorporate elements from multiple sources and use them to create something new. So the gypsies are from the Wolfman, but they're doing new things. And the painting is from Dorian Gray, but we actually spend some time with the artist, Charles Delaware Tate. So it keeps the classic horror and gothic atmosphere while still being imaginative and original. And that's Dark Shadows writing at its best.
The 1897 storyline gave Dark Shadows its highest ratings and biggest audience, 22 million people. The main male stars, like Jonathan Frid, David Selby, Michael Stroka, who played Petofi's sidekick Aristide, and Don Briscoe, became teen idols. And hundreds of kids would hang out outside of the studio to meet, get an autograph, or even a picture of their favorite Dark Shadow stars. They would even write the names of their favorite actors on the studio walls. Creator-producer Dan Curtis started counting the names and would warn actors if their wall count was dropping. The show's successful ratings led Dan Curtis to create a Dark Shadows movie, House of Dark Shadows. And because Quentin was so popular, they were able to have him hold the fort on the TV show, while Jonathan Frid was temporarily written out of the series so that he could star in the movie. In 1971, the writers had planned a storyline where Count Petofi would come to the present, but the series was cancelled, making this storyline Count Petofi's only appearance on the original series.
This and the 1795 storyline are often considered the best Dark Shadows, and while 1795 is more emotionally compelling, just like Quentin himself, this one's more fun. Everything but the kitchen sink is thrown into this story, but it works. All of the great Dark Shadows characters are in it. All the plot lines are interesting and have some neat surprises. Every actor has something to do, and they achieve the perfect tone of horror, romance, fantasy, and comedy. So I give it 4 Hoochkie Coos out of 4. Thank you for watching Dusty Old Movies, and have a creepy and campy day!